Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Propagandacast Addendum with me, your host, Imperial Dane. Today I want to talk to you about houses. And I sort of already at some point talked a bit, how fucking we could sort of improve garrison combat by actually adding garrison combat to the game. But I just want to talk more specifically just about the problem with houses in Companies 2, and to a lesser extent in Companies 1. I mean, houses in Companies 2 to an extent had a lot of issues. Like, they had to, for example, restructure how damage was done to it in several cases. They had to have, like, flamethrowers and incendiary grenades to different armies, just so they had tools to deal with them, because as it turns out, a garrison unit, in particular in the right place in the early game, is really powerful and can be difficult to deal with, in part because also of how they place them, which of course is another big topic. And in that sense, I mean, we sort of, arrive at a certain point where now again, we in the patch notes seeing they're changing more to be better versus garrison units, and that is versus buildings, because again, they're still really powerful despite all these changes to houses and all these counters. Like, it's still just really good to rush your house in the early game, lock yourself down, because your opponent can't easily deal with it. And that really, I think, says something about the whole of the game. Part of it is just, I would say, map design. I mean, some maps really just place buildings in the absolute worst of places, usually right next to the vital cutoff point, or right next to the fuel point, or in some amazing cases, right next to both, with just one building, which really just leads to this situation where you have to rush a house. Otherwise, there's nothing else to do. And again, this is not good map design. So again, part of the issue with houses is just terrible map design. We can see Westworld, where they just basically just got two houses right next to each of the two carve points, and they just basically kept making them weaker and weaker until they just blow over and, someone sneezes at them, because again, it turns out those are really amazing to occupy. So they had to make them really just easy to deal with, or, instead of just removing them. Similarly with Crossroads, those with good structures around the center, they had to weaken them, because it turns out those are really amazing to occupy. And again, part of it is just, how they place the map buildings. I mean, again, I say on a map like Arnhem Checkpoint, while there's a lot of houses and they're all in some cases good positions, they're not amazingly, hugely important at the same time. That it's not like you can just dominate the map. In this regard, part of it's also just map size. The smaller the map is, the more outsized the influence of the structure is. So again, like smaller maps, like placing buildings can just be a real big issue compared to just larger maps. So, I mean, in that sense, there definitely needs to be some changes in that department. Again, just, overall map size, and that's actually an argument made before, like, they need bigger maps. Like, again, I think one of the issues in companies that just crops up is the maps are too small. And again, it just makes houses a bigger issue. Again, if a house is an issue, if the map is small, it becomes an even bigger problem. So that's just sort of part of the issue overall. But also just the ways, and you have to really deal with the house, because again, depending on occupiers, it can be absolutely difficult to deal with, because again, some of them just are tough and deal a lot of damage in terms of infantry, and again, other armies then can't deal with that very easily. Again, you have very few specific counters, but it also means they can easily be countered themselves. So again, you just sort of end up with these sort of very narrow bands or sort of ranges of options in dealing with these things. And again, slightly improving mortars, I suppose, will help a bit, but doesn't really sort of change the overall issue that, like, you have to bring in very specific tool sets to deal with them. Like, you can't sort of deal with it tactically. Like, there's no suppression here, for example. There's no morale system. Just, somehow slightly move that. And again, you can't just rush infantry. They, like, say, again, a unit that might be sort of decent at countering, just, flush the house with raw numbers. At least that way deal with it. It's just, you can just rush ahead one infantry unit, get into a house, and it can be reasonably safe for quite some time, depending on what army you're up against. And again, that, I feel, again, it's just part of the problem. Again, there's just a very narrow band of options here for the early game, which again is part of the problem. Like, there needs to be more ways of dealing with a garrison unit in the early game, and that basically means there needs to be more ways generally just units can interact with it. Again, I would just prefer garrison combat, but even then, like, suppression for houses would be at least something. A morale system, I could just at least that way slightly whittle them down, could also be an idea. But there definitely, I think, needs to be some way of just increasing the number of ways you have of dealing with it, besides just, in some cases, just not placing the bloody thing right next to the cutoff point or the fuel point, or both. Again, those are sort of the issues that just kind of keep cropping up and keep creeping in. Like, again, a lot of the maps that is sort of just pop up and say, oh hey, this is amazing. I mean, they redesigned some Moscow Winter, and the solution was to bring more houses closer to the fuel points, not the opposite, for example. Like, there's just, why would you do that? You know how big of an issue structures are next to fuel points, and you add them closer? How's that supposed to make sense? So, I mean, in that regard, again, there just needs to be this sort of, change in map design paradigm, which, again, just accepts houses next to fuel points and car points, really bad idea until we have a better sort of structural set of tools to deal with them. But also just, it needs to be like, you know, other ways of dealing around just, you know, blowing up the house, because increasingly that just seems to be the way you just have to blow up the house, otherwise you got no chance. And again, that's not particularly good. But at the same time, at a certain point, that just houses to an extent end up not really being useful either. Like, you can't do anything with them, not like saying companies one, but at least, you know, turn them in most cases into like a Ford barracks. So in that regard, I think long term, also just adding more options, this is probably more for kind of thing we can do with the house, like maybe something up to like a medic post or repair station, stuff like that could, you know, I think be, you know, a great way of just adding some more longevity to buildings overall as the game progresses. You know, give more houses sort of more room for being stuff around, just the ones that are closest to where the points are vital. But over again, I think that just needs to be some change to map design. There needs to be an increase in range of options how I'm dealing with them, because again, when you have to give like every army almost more or less flamethrower or something else just to have a chance at dealing with buildings, again, that is, you're basically increasingly mirroring the armies to have a chance. That's not really good, is it? That's not really good. Again, that just limits your options. Again, there needs to be more ways of dealing with structures that aren't specifically flamethrower or making the house go kaboom, right? There needs to be more sort of infantry-centric options, or otherwise it's just dealing with garrison units, which is kind of what we're kind of lacking. And again, that would be, I think, really helpful. So I think that's sort of overall sort of the, you know, big points here. But I do think increasingly, again, like, it's becoming clear that just houses in general, how they handle it at the moment, are a problem. And part of course, is just terrible map design. Again, part of it's just maps are too small in some cases, or again, they keep placing the bloody houses way too close to the vital points, and in some cases both, which is then really, really bad. And a part of it, again, is just the lack of overall tools in dealing with them, which of course is not particularly helpful either. So in that regard, you know, and this is probably more for again, there needs to be an increase in your tools for dealing with it, and for companies to like just design better maps if you actually get more ones. You know, just be a bit sharper with those things, and maybe just readjust some of the maps you got here to, again, at least move the houses further away from the fuel and the carve point, because really that's just, you know, one of the primary issues. So just remove the houses in the first place. So there you go, a bit of a Propagandacaster Addendum on that little topic here. Hopefully you'll catch on, but who knows. Either way, if you agree with it, just sign off in the comments. If you disagree with that, it's going to be interesting. You can, of course, also feel free to sign off in the comments about that. This is Imperial Link signing off. We're back another time with another video. Cheers.